Welcome, everyone, to Watch Challenge. On each episode, we challenge ourselves to find and watch a film of a particular type, and then we report back the results to each other and you fine listeners as well. My name is Aaron Spears.
And I'm Mike Wendt. In this episode's challenge, just because Sundance is right around the corner, it is Sundance Alums.
It is. It is. That is a huge festival, Mike. A huge history to that. I
Yeah.
think there's an argument that it's even spawned a fairly fascinating film movement, which I'll mention in a moment as well. But let's start, the origin story. Do you remember when you first, as a as a beginning film geek, I forget what that word is actually, as a budding film geek, what was your first interaction with Sundance, or your first, thoughts of Sundance or films of Sundance?
Yeah, I used to read Entertainment Weekly a lot back when it was printed.
Is that printed anymore?
No.
I haven't looked for it in a while, I
The
guess.
last 2 years it's gone strictly online.
Okay.
Sadly. RIP.
Yeah,
Maybe it's saving trees. I guess you could look at it like that.
Sure.
But I do remember reading quite a bit about Clerks. The Kevin Smith's movie.
Oh,
And
sure.
I think that's what kind of got some of the exposure in my brain. But one of the things that really sticks out to me was ABC's 2020 did it could have been Dateline, but they followed three different filmmakers who had movies premiered at Sundance in, I want to say, 1998 or 1997.
Okay.
One of them was Vin Diesel, and he had like
Whoa.
he had an auteur writer director star film that played at Sundance. It got pretty bad, or it didn't get super high marks, but then the next year or months later he was in Saving Private Ryan, so his career didn't really hurt.
Sure.
But it's a really, I recently found it on YouTube and rewatched the episode. I can't remember the other filmmakers, but it was really interesting, and that's what kind of got the fascination of Sundance in my head, I would say.
Interesting. Wow, that just blew my mind. I've never thought of Vin Diesel as a director. I haven't really followed his career that closely.
And screenwriter, and
But yeah, definitely not as an auteur, definitely not as like someone heading off to Sundance where they're, in my perception, is like they're a scrappy little film and whatever. But wow. Yeah, I thought it was weird enough when he did that Sidney Lumet film.
Oh yes.
Find Me Guilty.
Yes.
Or something. Yeah. But I'm gonna have to look up that movie now. I'm curious.
Yeah, I'll try to find the YouTube clip for that. We can include it in the show notes.
Sure.
It's a fascinating watch.
My exposure was kind of similarly. It started off with magazines. I think probably Premiere Magazine. That was always a gift subscription my parents got me once they saw I was a film geek and in training, or film geek, heading down the path of film geekiness. And then back when there were also bookstores around, like several of them around, I remember going and getting either like Filmmaker or Movie Maker magazine, and they would definitely, because they were always covering more like independent films. I think it was Filmmaker magazine probably, that they would always have like a Sundance issue each year, like all through like the late '90s, and I was like, oh my god, because at that point too, there is some early internet, maybe some YouTube like directory groups to look up shit, but like it wasn't in my house at that time either. It was very like magazine based, and then basically I would make my list to try to find that at the local video store, if not check out Blockbuster, I guess, if I had to, in like a year or more when that movie would finally be there. Or it would really be like, oh, I got to head up to Cedar Lee in Cleveland, or once I was in college, I was in Dayton, I would go to the Neon movies to watch the art house stuff. But it quickly in that era became like the indie darlings of the mid 90s, and it was viewed as like this launching pad. So like, I'm going to film school. I wasn't doing production, but I was around those folks. It was like, if we can get a short and get it into Sundance, that was like, you made it, that was your way you could break into the industry, so to speak, or get noticed if you were just like a big enough personality and you were there with a movie. Like, people would check you out, or like, if you could sell it just right, that was a way to get in. Or maybe some other festivals then work your way into Sundance somehow. But I think, to me, because I started college in '95, going to film school down in Dayton, that was sort of that era post Sex Lies and Videotape, where there was all
Oh,
these
yeah.
people, these filmmakers that I just adored, that ended up going through either Sundance as a festival or the Sundance Writers Institute or the Sundance labs of various disciplines there. That it seemed like there was this movement, and we were watching it in real time, where the outsiders were getting into Hollywood via having success at Sundance, and then they're kind of taking over the industry, like that late '90s boom where you've got like the Paul Thomas Andersons and all these different filmmakers that were like Sundance darlings, that made good. I mean, even go back to like Reservoir Dogs and Tarantino and Soderbergh and all of them.
Yeah. No, I
That was
think
like,
like,
there's a film movement going on. Oh my god, it came out of just like this festival. From my perspective as a kid.
oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the time that you were in college, which you're a few years older than me, but that I'm almost like slightly envious because like that was, I think, the looking at a lot of the more recent things at Sundance, and it's nothing to disparage against it,
No,
but
no.
that was like the sweet spot. That was like when so many great films
Hmm.
that made a cultural impact, I think, on a lot of the future
Yeah.
filmmakers now. I don't, I guess this could almost be a broader topic for another time, talking about the quality of the films now. But yeah, back then, I mean, that was just every time you saw that Laurel Sundance, you knew it was going to be something special or
Right.
something like unique.
Well, then I've also read, actually, just a quick shout out. There's a book called The Sundance Kids, and I'm not remembering the author off the top of my head, but it talks about like that generation that kind of like went through Sundance, then like took over Hollywood. And it's, that's from like an insider's entertainment reporter perspective. But there's also like filmmakers and people that worked at Sundance who I've taught, or even producers. I think Christine Vachon has talked about it before. She does killer
Mhm.
films about how, yeah, but then it just became a marketplace because once it was a thing, now it's like you've got. I remember the punching bag for this was always the Spitfire Grill. If you remember that movie, where like it
Oh
was
yeah,
bought at Sundance for like 13 or 15 million dollars. Then we're like, it's gonna be the next indie darling, and it's gonna be the next sleeper hit. And like you can't necessarily make a sleeper hit. Like just because you got it there and there's like the hype machine at the festival doesn't always translate to like it's gonna be the next big thing. Sometimes the next big thing is a surprise because no one saw it coming. That's what makes it fun and energetic and interesting. So
yeah. It
the
makes me
marketplace, I've heard the argument that the marketplace aspect of it really ruined Sundance once it was a thing.
it makes me think. This is a more recent one, but say like the film Hamlet 2. Do
Oh
you remember that
yeah,
one?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so that one made all this big news because it was acquired for double digit millions, and then it came out and it was like a poof in the because I think partially because they put it super wide,
yeah, yeah.
a lot of empty because like I know you worked at Cedar Lee. I was working at a Regal. We
Hmm.
even got it like the opening weekend, and it was probably me and like a handful of other ball to
Yeah.
balls college students who went to go see it.
That
But
was that was the same story at Cedar when it came out. Because we're like, why is this going so wide? I didn't know if people are gonna even come watch it here.
yeah, so yeah, it's like there's obviously a lot of great that came from Sundance being this innovator of a film festival, but then I think that's the other side where you have these high expectations for things that sometimes don't always reach those
Exactly.
highs.
Which sucks because like both of us as just being like unabashed film fans, like that's sort of unfair to the film itself too.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah,
you're like, so now because the entertainment reporting gets going the way it goes, like you said, you remember, like Hamlet 2 or like the Spitfire Grill, like I mentioned, that's not even a knock on the quality of this. I thought Hamlet 2 was hilarious. It would have been
same.
better if I saw it with a whole bunch of people rather than like five of us, spread out amongst a 300 seat theater. But like, that's not the film's fault that the hype machine just kind of went a little too nuts, in the PR department.
Yeah,
Um,
I
you
still
know,
rock me sexy Jesus on my iPod. I mean, I'll admit.
Still funny just when you say that. I'm like, oh, I'm picturing it. Yep, that's some good stuff. But so yeah, for this one, we didn't even have to really worry about with this topic basic Google search results. Trying to dig in a little deeper because holy shit, there's so many movies. All it
Oh,
had to do for this criteria was like play at Sundance. So did you like scale that back for yourself, or how did you go about your picks?
yeah, so I started. when doing research for this episode, I did kind of stick with the theme, and I think this listeners of the show might pick up on the theme. I tend to like a certain genre of film, but
Okay.
I wanted to pick something in the early days, then
Okay.
something in that '90s craze, and then the movie that I ultimately picked was just something that it was kind of almost like a spin the wheel where it lands. Oh, this sounds interesting. Let's watch it.
Interesting. Okay.
So, but I know, like, in looking at the festival itself, and I think you might have a little more notes than me, but I noticed that the festival used to do a lot of retrospectives.
Yeah.
Look at some of the thing, like they used to do, looks like a lot of like Charlie Chaplin and all that stuff, but they in the '90s they moved away from that, in coming what it is, where it's like more of a
Right.
premiere festival, not so much retrospectives, where I think that's more like a New York Film Festival. Can still seems to
Hmm.
play a lot of retrospectives as well, because of restorations and all that stuff,
Right. Right.
but it doesn't seem to be as something that happens now
Right. Right.
as
I think
much.
it's probably just so packed now. Like there's so many categories.
Yeah,
So I tend to gravitate from Sundance. Obviously, like you see the big audience award winners or that sort of stuff. I tend to gravitate in recent years towards it's like the generation next or the up next kind of award. So it's like really rewarding and celebrating people are really pushing the boundaries of film. So I dig that
sure.
category a lot. But also like they have such a great domestic, meaning U.S. and then also international or world documentaries.
Yeah.
And as I was prepping this one, I was like, man, I actually haven't watched a documentary for a few weeks, which is kind of odd for me. Usually I have a pretty healthy dose of documentaries mixed in. So yeah, you may notice a theme in, in there with my picks. But yeah, I hadn't really, and I'd read like the Sundance Kid, and there's even one called Down and Dirty Pictures that Peter Biskind wrote after he
Hmm.
wrote Easy Riders, Raging Bulls. It's all about Sundance, kind of in that heyday marketplace boom. But that's a little bit more like dish and rumors and stuff. Stuff happened, but I was like, it's kind of more like salacious reporting kind of style of writing rather than like great documentation of like what happened. But yeah, I was a little shocked that I was like, okay, it started in '78, the festival, but it was the Utah/US Film Festival, and really it sounded like it was more of a way to like get more filmmakers to come to Utah to film. Kind of
Yeah.
like you're with the Greater Cleveland Film Commission, like that is no small feat, and that's very important to do. But doing it through a festival, I was like, ooh, what a cool idea to do that. You're going to showcase stuff. But yeah, a lot of retrospective things. And then they immediately, pretty immediately, the next year they launched the Sundance Institute. I had no idea that started in '79, like 1 year in,
Yeah,
which is
that's
a great way to promote filmmakers coming in too.
yeah, I would assume that was like '90s or
Yeah,
something.
I did too. Yeah, once it was like really rolling. And then in '81, it switched to this one, just kind of made me snicker a little bit, the US Film and Video Festival, which really, putting a flag in that, like, we're also going to do video. And it's like, ooh,
Yeah.
are we? But, at a point in time, like, that was like, this is going to be a lasting format. Now it'll be in people's homes. And this is a new format for filmmakers. It's a new tool for filmmakers to explore, etc. And then in '84, we get what we now know as, the Sundance Film
Yes.
Festival, named after his obviously Redford's iconic, Butch Cassidy Sundance role. And we were off and running. So '84 becomes Sundance, and by '89, you've got like the Sex, Lies, and Videotape generation.
Yeah,
And you're like,
that's like where it kind of
holy
really
cow,
launched in the stratosphere. Actually,
absolutely.
real quick before we go into those, have
Yeah,
you ever been there in person?
I haven't. Have you?
Same. I in I got to work on the movie Take Shelter that shot here.
Hmm.
It was opening at Sundance, and I had started in the process of buying tickets and getting flights and everything,
Yeah,
and my car literally, like a week or so before, like the engine died. So it was either fix my car, get a new car,
yeah.
or go to
Go to
Sundance.
Sundance.
And now there's probably, down the line, if they make the Fablemans type movie about me or something, uh, it, that might have been like something that I would change and be like, oh, I'm definitely going to Sundance, and I probably should have, but no, I had to stick with the car, so didn't go. But
Yet, didn't go yet.
yes,
Yeah,
I do plan to go, but I have liked in the last couple years that when things went to digital because of pandemic, it's like have been able to like stream some of the movies
Mhm.
while they're premiering. So it's almost like being there, and you don't have to deal with all the cars and all the lodging issues, which I always hear is a
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Uh, but yes, I do. That is a bucket list thing. I would like to go to.
absolutely. I've been doing the same thing. Like me, it was 2 years in a row. I was able to watch several movies because they were also streaming. Like you said, I could just buy a virtual ticket. And
Yeah,
even a couple of folks I know who have been there, either as like film critics or just as film fans, were saying like, "Oh my God, you did it the way you should then, because you'd be lucky if you can get in two, hopefully, just as a paying attendee. We're not
yeah,
getting VI treatment. If we go, well, if you end up going with the film at some point, Mike, hopefully you do, but." If you're just going as a film fan, like it's spread out all around town. Who knows what the weather's going to be? Like you said, lodging. And I was able to watch like 4 movies in a day from the privacy of my own home. And I
yeah.
don't think that's going to be replicable when I finally get there.
Yeah, I've tried to buy a couple for this year. They've had some major ticketing issues.
Hmm.
Um, and I have one that's still in this like in the queue, and I keep trying to hit purchase, and it keeps telling me it's not working. So I don't
Oh,
know. It seems like too many people have caught on now, but we'll see if I can get that eventually.
sure, sure. So, not knowing your theme yet, Mike,
Sure.
I'll see if I can guess it as you go through your films here. What's an honorable mention you want to throw out before we jump in here?
Sure. So the first honorable mention that I want to discuss is Smooth Talk. It's from 1985, so very early
Yeah.
in the actual Sundance realm. This is a coming of age film that stars Laura Dern. She's like this young, kind of rebellious teenager, and she meets this Treat Williams who plays like a perfect sleazeball. And she starts like this kind of a slight forbidden relationship with him. It's really smart, and I think this was one of the first lead roles that Laura Dern had, and it clearly showed she had a talent. And uh, I know there's been a lot of talk lately of nepo babies, and I know she has very famous parents, but I think sometimes having famous parents can only take you so far. She has that raw
Oh
talent,
yeah, yeah.
and in this movie, I don't know why Joyce Chopra wasn't perhaps a bigger name in narrative films.
Hmm.
She didn't really, she made some, but after that, but she's kind of went in the doc route and TV route, but
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
very interesting film, and it recently came on Criterion, so that's how I.
Oh, all right. Well, that's always a good stamp of approval when Criterion's willing to put your film out.
Oh
Wait,
yeah.
like so it's streaming on Criterion or
Oh
they
no,
put it
I'm
out as a
sorry. They released it Blu-ray, and
Oh, okay. Excellent.
yeah, I think they did there was some kind of retrospective screening that they did of it at the New York Film Festival
Oh, cool. Cool,
last
cool.
year, I think in time with that. How about you?
My first one doesn't quite go back that far, but I picked it. I want to make it as an honorable mention because it was one of the first it was one of the first ones I do remember. Like I couldn't find not right away, but I couldn't find when I knew it was out on VHS, and I couldn't find it. And then this is also the time I learned that at my local library branch, you could do a request for materials. So I requested they get a VHS copy of The Celluloid Closet from
Okay.
1995. Rob Epstein and Jeffrey Friedman's directing partners. They directed a bunch over the years. Another Sundance favorite of theirs, which I believe is a short, The Times of Harvey Milk, which would go on to inspire eventually Milk with
Yeah.
Sean Penn. Celluloid Closet is so it's personal favorite, just doc of mine because it was also early on. It's an early on documentary experience for me as well, but also it's a film geek heaven kind of to
Mhm.
watch because it deals with LGBTQ representation, although it wasn't called that necessarily at the time, in Hollywood throughout cinema history. But at the same time, since it's based on Vito Russo's book, I can't remember when the book came out. I want to say it was 80s or so. So like it really only goes up so far. But if you go to the Wikipedia entry for the Celluloid Closet, some editor has gone through and listed all of the films mentioned in the movie, and you
Yeah.
scroll through that going like, oh my god, how do they cover all of this in like, 90 minutes, 100 minutes, or whatever it is? But they really do, and they have all these really thoughtful interviews with different folks that are actors or writers. I think the marquee names are like, it's narrated by Lily Tomlin. I think Tom Hanks gives an interview, but it's folks that were like saying like, oh, I saw this as a kid. I wasn't out of the closet yet. I wasn't even out to my friends yet, but like,
Yeah.
I finally I saw myself in this like one little side character. Like, oh wait, because it had to be so coded during that quote unquote golden era of Hollywood, and the film kind of dives into that with, some of it's fairly tragic, some of it's a little melancholy, some of it's just joyful, and some of it's just like, oh my god, I can't believe how we used to write characters in these in
Right.
these
Right.
these movies. I mean, I'm all for like it was a product of its time sort of thing, but some of you are just like, no, that's just offensive. Period. Like, oh my god, I can't believe we were doing this. But fascinating documentary, especially if you're, I assume if you're listening to a Watch Challenge, film podcast, you've got at least some film geek tendencies. It'll definitely expand your watch list for like cinema history as well.
That's great.
Do you have another honorable mention, Mike? Or
Yes. So my next one, going into that, that heyday, I would say,
sure,
is Todd Solondz.
I've heard it
Welcome to
both
the
ways.
Welcome to the Dollhouse, which is one of those films that, like I said, as I was kind of growing up, starting to look for movies outside of the norm, reading
Yeah,
Entertainment Weekly or whatever, read a ton about this movie. And this was a movie that I too either got at the library, if I remember correctly, or we used to have, there was a video store like 3 blocks from my house called Carino's Video. It's still one of the last ones in existence around here.
yeah.
Uh, but got to rent it, and I think at the time I didn't really fully grasp what I was watching, because I saw, like, you see the cover and everything, and, it's very like colorful and looks like a lot of fun. I mean, it's weird, and it goes into very weird places. And Dawn, or Heather Mazzaro plays Dawn Wiener Dog, is what she's known as in the
Yeah,
movie.
unfortunately.
Yeah, she has some very, people treat her like shit in
Yeah, yeah.
this movie. But very recently I revisited it again, and boy, it's a really good film. And I like the fact that a few years ago he brought her back in this movie, in another film that I wish I don't have the tab up, but he's just his let's see, the movie is called Wiener Doll from
Oh,
2000,
yeah, yeah. I did see that one.
which I should have known that right away. No, I just appreciate his kind of filmmaking, just highlighting just offbeat and odd characters. And a lot of times, yeah, people are not treated well, but at the end of the day, I think there's always something that you can glean from it. And I'm it looks like if he hasn't made a movie since 2016, I would hope he has another one in him. But yeah, very unique guy.
Very. What's the polite phrase for there? I would, because we would play. I played several of his movies when I was working at the Art House Theater over the years, including Wiener Dog
Yeah.
and like palindromes and some of those. And I would it was like, oh, like it's he's a provocateur, so make
Yeah.
sure you've
Yes.
read up on this film and what you are about to walk into, because the not going to spoil anything at all with this one if you haven't seen Wiener Dog. Infuriating ending, in my opinion, but it'll get you talking.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, and definitely had some people talking and yelling in the lobby after that one was done. Because when you just start asking questions politely as the manager, just engaging the patrons, sometimes they're like, "And you like this?" I was like, "No, I was just talking to you about it. I was just talking." I did pick one other one. Actually, my most recent one is from 2005. My second and last honorable mention is one I was able to. I did see on the big screen, but also revisited recently because it was such a memorable theatrical experience. I was like, oh, I completely forgot about that. It meant a lot to me when I saw it, and I haven't seen it since then. And it is kind of hard to recreate if you're watching it at home, because it's a movie that I think demands your unfocused attention, which you're going to get in a theater. And
Yeah.
it's hard to do that at home, and like your phone's right there, or a sandwich up in the kitchen is right there waiting for you, or something. That is a 2005 film, Into Great Silence.
Mm.
It is from German director Philipp Groening. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's also just a fascinating production story where he wanted to make a documentary about I wrote it down here, hold on, the Grand Chartreuse, which is the head monastery of the Carthusian order from France. And so he asks the monks at this monastery, the monks that run it, hey, I really would love to figure out a way to do a documentary about this monastery and the life of the monks here. And so he proposed the idea in 1984. The monks were like, yeah, we want to think about this. We're going to think about this for a minute. 16 years later, they're like, yeah, yeah, we're going to let you do that. I assume there's probably some stipulations, obviously, his approach or whatever. Basically, his approach was he moved in with them for like 6, 8 months, just him. So he's
Wow.
producer, cinematographer, sound, everything. He's the only one there with them. And he also used no artificial light. He wanted to capture them, like that life, that place, that time. And he then also was his own editor. So like it's seriously,
Wow.
it's a one-man show of this, but it's also 162 minutes.
Whew.
Right, exhale, long exhale. I would say it's contemplative and really allows you to like visit the space. Obviously, you're not going to sit there with these monks who spend a lifetime there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it really gives you a sense of like the serenity of the, like at one point there's just this great shot of the sun coming in through a window and you can just see like the particles in the air and you're just like, we just hold this for a couple of minutes just and like
Yeah.
this it's just being there. And it really it was such a unique shot on digital Sony camera, but then there were 35 millimeter prints made, and it was very early on, like I think the first year or so when I was at the Art House Theater that it came out, and I was like, I built the print, put it on the platters, and I was like, I am watching this movie, and just sat there. It's not like you're wrapped, by it or anything like that,
Yeah.
but it was like it's such an experience. You just, you give it 40 minutes or so, and you're like, oh, okay, just get comfortable.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds great. I've
It's
never heard of that at all.
Yeah, it's so I mean it played for like a week maybe because like
Sure.
good reviews, but everyone sees the running time like it's what there's 5 lines of dialogue. Like monks aren't known for being chatty guys. Like they may be
Right.
philosophical, and what they do say, here or there that you overhear is like, oh, all right, but it's more just like giving you such an intense sense of like place and like just I don't know. It was just a very serene kind of feel to me. So
That's amazing.
yeah. But all right, honorable mentions out of the way. I have some thoughts on what your theme might be, Mike. But let's see.
Sure.
What's your pick?
Yes. So my pick is a documentary,
Oh,
and it is called All American High.
I'd like to welcome you all back from a summer to a new year.
Visiting us from Finland, Rikamari Rahala.
First minute I came, I didn't know anybody. I was just looking around and I felt I was lost.
You got the punkers, the meddlers, and the preppies. The punkers, they want to have nothing to do with society. They always have something to say against it. The preppies are working for it, and the meddlers are just out to party.
To be a homecoming queen is just an honor.
Johnson. Gibbs. If someone doesn't answer, it means they drown.
In getting ready for a party, there's a lot to do.
Stand by the guy in the corner.
I supply the cups and the beer.
We will go shopping for a marriage partner in this class.
By the power invested in me by Torrance High School, I now pronounce you husband and wife. It was a good ceremony.
High school prepares more for social life than for work life.
Definitely, I went the coming of age route. But this one is interesting. So it's by a director named Kiva Rosenfeld. And basically, he followed the senior class of 1984 in Torrance High School in Los Angeles. So, which is not as, it's like probably a less rich area of Los Angeles, essentially. But the way how he phrased this movie, I thought was kind of brilliant. Was he probably could have went a route where he picks like the most popular people or something,
oh,
but what
sure.
he did was he focused on making this exchange student from Finland being the narrator of the story. So, he covers all of the bases of the school year, but it's basically seen through her eyes. So she is narrating,
Okay.
and it is at times very funny. There's there's a part where she says she hears everybody saying the words "fucking shit," and
Okay.
so she says, she's like, "I didn't think shit could fuck," which made me laugh.
Yeah.
But I think the way how it's very tight. It's only an hour, but I cheated just slightly in that I watched the what's called American High Revisited. It's basically the first hour of the film is the original release. But then like the last 25 minutes or so is you get an update on all the people who are featured in it. So this era, of course, 84, you have a lot more like punk rocker type of people, but it seems like all those punk rock type of people, spoiler alert, all became cops or military people.
That's not the direction I thought you were going.
Yeah, no, it was like, it's really kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But I thought this was, I think this is the kind of doc that I sometimes love to see from Sundance. A few years later, or a few years from when this was made, there was another film that came out at Sundance called American Teen, which kind of it tried to like do the same thing, but they also tried to like phrase it like the Breakfast Club, the rebel, you had the popular girl and stuff. But I think this is so much better, expertly done, and I don't know, it was shown on PBS, so it's I think that's why they did this revisited, because the rights became an issue. So it's like never, I don't think it was ever really released as a standalone, but if you watch this, the revisited, it's like you're essentially seeing the film as it was shown at Sundance.
Yeah, I remember when American Teen came out, again, just working at the art house then, they made a huge push for like, it's like the Breakfast Club, but a documentary. And I don't remember caring for it very much because it felt like this was a documentary made in the era of reality television, and it was trying to get that kind of teen hope crowd out to see a documentary, or maybe they just knew they could sell some television rights to it. This one sounds way more interesting to me because it's before reality TV was really a thing. So this is just a documentarian going in and looking at a high school. Is it like sit down interviews too, or how does the structure work for it?
There's occasional sit down interviews, but they're done in a way that's kind of, it's not like, the perfect 3-point lighting system or something.
Right.
It's like they're kind of more spur of the moment. I'm just impressed of how he was able to encompass a whole year in 59 minutes.
Yeah.
Which it's like, it flies by and it's entertaining, and it's like a time capsule, because then you're seeing all the different hairstyles, you're seeing the teachers talk about certain things that are, like they talk about the Cold War a little bit. You're hearing music that was popular from the era. He got the rights to like, Talking Heads and Go-Go's and stuff like that.
Okay.
Which probably was easier back then than now.
Yeah. In the 80s. Yeah.
But highly entertaining. But yeah, I would say if you stumble across American Teen, I would probably, it's interesting to look at, but that one is not nearly as focused as this.
Or like the antidote would be like, I know famous documentarian Frederick Wiseman did one just called High School early on in his career, which I'm not looking up right now, but I'm going to assume as usual, Frederick Wiseman, like 7 hours long kind of thing of that, where now I'm like, how did this guy did it? This guy, Keva did it in 59 minutes or whatever. So it's possible. Good editing work, I would imagine. But no, that sounds really fascinating. Especially, I love that time capsule kind of vibe where like it clearly just caught that moment when it was happening.
Yeah. So pretty big recommend from me.
Yeah. Excellent.
How about you?
Similar theme, not necessarily coming of age by any means, but similar theme in that it's capturing a moment, but it's kind of capturing a moment in different ways. So my pick for Sundance Alums is one called For All Mankind.
Mm,
It is
yeah.
a documentary. Came out in 1989, directed by Al Reiner.
Having gotten away from the spacecraft, I was able to really realize what this place was like that we had landed in. I had tried to anticipate what it would be like for many years, but it was obvious that there was no way one could have anticipated what it would be like to stand in the valley of Tarsletro, a place deeper than the Grand Canyon and equally as spectacular. See this brilliantly illuminated landscape with a brighter sun than anyone had ever stood in before, with a blacker than black sky. And then to top the whole scene off in this blacker than black sky was a beautiful, brilliantly illuminated blue marble that we call the Earth. The path of evolution is now in space as much as on Earth.
It's a fascinating, and I don't know if it's a subgenre or not, but I've definitely seen a few documentaries like this where there's no talking heads in the documentary. It's entirely archival NASA footage, most of which the public had never seen before. So the film essentially, through all of this footage, tells you the story of Apollo 11. And it's just the footage. And then they did record some interviews with folks that worked on it, that were in the, that were like, on the mission, but also in mission control. And so you get a little like waxing philosophic voiceovers to it, but it's all footage basically just showing you only with NASA's footage, Apollo 11, getting ready, blast off to the moon, back home. But what they did was they actually used all this footage NASA had from Apollo 7 through 17 in order to create kind of then a fictionalized-ish version of Apollo 11. But ostensibly, it's all about that Apollo 11. But there is footage of there's footage in there of folks on the moon that aren't Neil Armstrong or Buzz Aldrin. And you hear them talking to each other like, oh, hey, John, we're going to do blah, blah, blah. And you're like, wait, what? But ostensibly, like the package deal is like, this is the archival footage piecing together every moment of the Apollo 11 mission. So it's all just like this amazing footage. And I guess at the time in the 80s, when they started looking into this, there was all this footage the public had never seen. So Al Reiner and his editor, Susan Corda, went through 6 million feet of film.
Wow.
And 80 hours of audio interviews with all kinds of NASA folks and put this whole thing together, which was just spectacular. So like, I don't know, it hit me in a number of ways where like, I'm kind of like, I'm not a big science guy, but I'm definitely like a NASA geek. When they do, the moon came out, I was watching that. Like it was all like, oh my God, I got to hit play on this. I can't believe I've never even heard of this one before.
Yeah.
So a couple of moments I wrote down. Oh, and Brian Eno does the soundtrack to it, the score. And it's not like an overbearing score for the most part. Honestly, I kind of just didn't even notice it. It's just like a great bed for like the mood, I think, to kind of string everything together. It's kind of fascinating. There's one point where you see them doing a spacewalk on the way to the moon, and you can see I don't know who it is, but they're like, they're tethered and they're out, they're filming some stuff. And then they just casually, as they're talking about doing the spacewalks, like, yeah, we were traveling 25,000 miles an hour at that time. Like, whoa, what? Because like, it's so serene and like, it's, weightlessness is kicking in and all this stuff. There's one part, I can't remember, I wrote down Buzz Aldrin saying it, but I'm not 100% sure it was him. But one of the comments they have was, as they're blasting off, one of the astronauts is reflecting on sitting on like just that much, like you're sitting on that much fuel and the explosion that is propelling you out into space, and says, I have no idea how this part works, but I know how my part of this mission works.
Yeah.
And they were kind of just saying how like, yeah, you're putting your hands into like the whole of the crew, including everyone, down on the ground to the person who's sitting in the seat, who you just happen to be the lucky person that's in that seat, that you don't know how the whole ship operates or how every button, when you push that, it does this, but they know what their part of that is. And it's just like this faith and this trust in the whole mechanism of NASA working together to get this mission accomplished.
Yeah.
And I guess in my head, I'm always like, yeah, if you're an astronaut, like, yeah, you know how the rockets work, how that, like, that's not necessarily true. And so like, it's such a collective team effort. You're sort of like wowed by it at a certain point. But I just thought the way that he phrased that, we're like, well, I know how my part works and I'm good on that part. It's like, man, I don't know if psychologically, I would not be able to handle that.
Yeah.
I'm also the confined space, and there's a whole other reasons why I would never be going up into space. But it's also kind of awesome because once they're on the moon, they just turn into children at points too. Like they're taking the rover out for a spin, or they're like dropping a feather and a hammer to prove that like they're going to fall at the same rate. And they're just like hopping around, being goofballs. They just start singing, and you're like, man, that's so awesome that like such intense, science and math geeks that are like astronauts, as soon as you get to the moon, they're just like, wee. It was so much fun. Oh my God. And at one point, I think it was before they get to the moon, they have it's the cassette tape era. So they have like a little cassette player, and the one dude brought the fucking 2001 theme, that Strauss theme.
Oh yes.
Dun, 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 dun. And like they played, and they're like, this is so weird. But I was like, oh my God, as a film geek, this is amazing. Like a film gave them the language to express the awe that they have when they're like looking back and seeing the earth. And I was just like, oh my God, that's so cool. So yeah, it went on. It won the Grand Jury Prize documentary. It won the Audience Award documentary. And since I currently, in early 2023 here, I'm still working on wrapping up my 2022 watch list that I need to finish up. And I thought that Richard Linklater movie is just sitting there from 2022, Apollo 10.5, A Space Age Childhood. I am watching this immediately because it's I'm like, oh my God, this is the best time to watch this movie. So
yes, I have this. My wife sometimes yells at me because I have this. She says like I'm like a snob towards animated films sometimes. So like that one's been on the queue, and I've been meaning to watch it, and I will get to it. But it's there's so many live action movies that are out there,
Yeah, no, I felt the same way, and I think we're both probably equal Linklater fans. But for some reason, once it's animated, I'm like, I'll get to it, even though like I just need to. So our official Watch Challenge picks for Sundance Alums are All American High from 1987 and For All Mankind from 1989. Ooh, pretty close together too. I didn't realize that until just now.
Yeah.
Mike, what have we got up in front of us for our next challenge?
So Oscar nominations are just right around the corner. So we're going to go with Oscar snubs. So, things that we felt that should have been nominated, but were not, or things that we thought should have won, but did not.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So the only so it's like, if they never got the nomination, or if they just didn't win, but should have, covered them both.
Yeah. All right. That's what I would say.
That sounds good. Now we'll probably also have some thoughts at the top of the show on the current year, but I still have some gaping holes in my 2022 watch list. So I'm not going to be picking anything from 2022 necessarily, but I think we'll definitely be expressing some thoughts on that.
Oh yeah. I think maybe that's too new, because you got to let it like settle a little bit, because maybe sometimes the what they call it, recency bias or something.
Oh, we will definitely be talking about that, I think, as well.
Maybe, we should give it a few years to breathe, I think.
Yeah, indeed. So if you'd like to send us any of your picks for Oscar snubs, that one that's just really been bugging you all these years, please send them our way. Or if you just like to submit any other topic or genre you'd like covered on a future show, watchchallengepodcast@gmail.com, or just head over to the links that are in the show notes.
And real quick, I just, forgot to mention earlier in the episode, but some of the friends of the show, Robert Banks had a Sundance short called Outlet, and Laura Paglin had a short film called No Umbrella, Election Day in the City. So, if you can find those, they're sometimes hard to find, but, shorts, whatever. But I would highly suggest looking those out, because they're both Cleveland people who had
absolutely.
So until next time, rate and review the show in whatever podcast app you're using, and we'll see you on the next channel.